where together we're learning how to have peace in the process of everyday business ownership by improving one step at a time how we think and what we do. I'm your host, Amy Stout. Have you ever said, I don't have time for that? Time got away from me. I don't know where the time went. Anybody? It is so hard to manage your time as a human in general, but I think it's just exponentially aggravated by being an entrepreneur because you have complete control over your time. And it's hard to learn how to manage it well. And if you have ever felt like that, then I have quite an incredible solution for you today, because my dear friend Lissa Figgins is joining us. She has her own podcast called Redeem Her Time, and she is actually a time management coach. Like, that is her entire thing. And she has years of experience and wisdom that have led to where she is now. And I just was soaking up every second of our conversation. I feel like I learned so much. She reframed things. She put beautiful analogies to different concepts. And I just really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So if you have ever struggled with time management, which, like, who hasn't? This is your episode, and I hope that you enjoy. Let's dive in. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week. I'm so excited to have my new friend Lissa on to talk all about redeeming our time. Thank you for joining me today, Lissa.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. This is time well spent, and I pray it's going to be a blessing to everyone who listens.
Absolutely. And if you guys like what you hear, there's a lot more of it, because Lissa has her own podcast as well, all about what we're going to be talking about today. So I love that people can just get more and more from you if they like what they're hearing.
Yes, yes.
So I'd love to hear, just to start out, share with us about you, about your stage, where you're at in life, in business, and what you're most passionate about.
Yeah. Well, my name is Lissa, which is actually Melissa without the M-E, because it's not about me. So rolled off my tongue one day, and it's just a great way to remember.
That's adorable.
Yeah. And I am in midlife, just turned 50 and loving it. So I just want to say to all of you out there who are, younger, like, it does just keep getting better as you know who you are, and as you really start identifying what matters most. So the things that matter most in my life right now, I'm a daughter of God. Of course, that's number one in my life. I've been married nearly 30 years. My husband is an Army veteran, so we have weathered a lot of storms of deployments and also PTSD and things like that in him coming home. I'm a mom to 3 kids who are now all out of the nest and live on opposite sides of the country. No one lives anywhere near where we are, which they're all where they're supposed to be, and 2 are serving in the military. But yeah, so it's a different stage of life in that way. I do have 2 dogs that like to, keep me busy and all that. So we live in the Midwest. We live on what we affectionately call the Figgy Farm. And it's just our little piece of peace here in the middle of a really busy and chaotic world. And yeah, like when you ask about, like, what else are you passionate about, like, helping women to make the best use of their time is really just on my heart. And so I'm a podcaster. My podcast is Redeem Her Time. I'm a time management coach. I also serve women in our community and at our church as well. And, I'm just in the season of life where I have a little bit more time on my hands than maybe I did when I had little kids. And yet someone's always needing me, because I'm still helping to launch those kids, and I'm supporting my now aging parents, and, and then trying to maintain everything else in between. So, yeah, there's a lot, but when it's in alignment with what you're called to in the season you're in, then it's not about busyness. It's about faithfulness and just walking that out on a daily basis.
So true. What brought you into this concept of time management, coaching, and redeeming your time? What led to you chasing that as your business?
That is such a great question. And I hope this answer does not turn anyone away, but it's because I did it all the wrong way for way too long.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
You have to go through it.
Oh my goodness, this is like all the things I wish I would have known and figured out way back in the day. And so I thought, gosh, if I can help other women to shorten their learning curve, And really kind of just, I'll kind of give you like the quick, like Cliff Notes, and then I'll kind of take you a little bit through my journey. But really what I've learned over the years is busy is not just a matter of a disordered schedule or to-do list. It's really coming from a disordered heart, right? And let's be honest, we live in a really busy and distracting world. There's always someone or something vying for our attention. We have this device that's like an extra appendage because it's always within arm's reach, right? And so it can just feel like everything is out of order, all the time. And so if we're waiting for our external circumstances to be in perfect alignment and be in peace, like you talk about, it's never going to happen. And I've truly learned a well-ordered life flows from a well-ordered heart. Like it comes from the inside out. So if I go back, 20s was graduating from college, becoming a teacher, having kids, like all of those things. And then 30s, like I was just trying to manage all the things and life was way too busy. But honestly, I thought that's just how life was. And I think a lot of women wore busy as a badge of honor, right? Like, oh, I feel productive. I feel important if I'm busy, And I remember vividly standing on the stairs one day, my daughter, who's our youngest, was on my hip. My hubby is across the ocean and I had like 100 things on my to-do list and I was dropping every ball. And I remember just like having that moment where I went, I can't keep going like this. Like I was frustrated. I was overwhelmed. I was exhausted. I was not peaceful. I was not present. I would like show up places on the outside. My body was there. Have you ever been in this thing where your body is there, but your heart and your mind are like a world away? And I just knew that I couldn't keep doing that, but I had no idea how to change it. Like I just knew there's not ever enough time. And there's certainly not enough of me to fit everything in. And it seems like there's always expectations and obligations and distractions that I'm just reacting to all day long, and I saw it starting to affect like these different areas of my life, my faith walk, my relationships, the work that I was doing, my wellness, my home, my peace, my joy, right? Like all those things. But I didn't figure out any answers then. Well, I didn't figure out any true answers then. I thought that it was in having a more organized home or having a more organized, schedule for my day with my kids and things like that. And while those aren't bad things, it really wasn't the final solution. So for me, it was the year I turned 40. Have you ever had like a milestone moment? Like maybe it's a birthday, an anniversary, an event in life, or an event in the life of someone you love. And you like wake up one day and you just look in the mirror and you're like, oh my goodness, how did I get here? Who am I? Right? How did I get here? Where did time go? Where am I going? And so that really was my wake up call when I turned 40 and trying to figure out who am I outside of being a wife and an army wife and a mom. And what is this going to look like as my kids get older, knowing they wouldn't stay in my nest forever. And yet I always felt like I had to be doing. And so that's really when God starts shifting some things in my heart. And I let go of having to always do and constantly comparing myself to everyone else around me, right? And social media is a great tool to inspire, but it also can be a place that we fall into a lot of, well, I'm not enough because she's got this figured out and she's got this figured out. And we think like I have to do everything, right? And just always striving. And that's really when I just said, okay, God, what do you have to say about redeeming my time? How do I slow down so I can actually listen to your voice and hear what you are asking of me, not what everyone around me is asking? And then how do I create space, like margin, white space, like, and take out the things that are the distractions, those things that are cluttering up my heart and my calendar.
Yeah, that's so good. Oh my goodness. We have so many directions we could go. But first, let me say that I think that going through it and struggling through it is probably the best credential that you could have for helping other people. Because that's my answer too, is I fight so much for peace because I'm so naturally not. So naturally just easily stressed, easily spiraling, easily overthinking. And I feel like God, it's been a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like since he called me to start the podcast, it has been accountability for me to fight for peace as I am helping other people trying to do that as well. So I love that. I love that qualification. And I don't think it is a dissuasion at all.
It makes you more real. It makes you more relatable.
Yeah.
It makes you, like really understand where that woman, maybe 3-5 years, who you were back then, into really understanding that. And I love the fact that you put that, you know, the word peaceful there. The verse that just came to mind is God is not a God of disorder, but of peace.
Yeah.
Right. And those two are so connected, because I feel like when our life is out of order and it feels like chaos out here, and our heart is out of order and it feels like chaos, ain't nobody got peace.
No.
Right. Not at all. And but when you look at the pictures on Instagram, or you look at the pictures on Pinterest, it's not some crazy woman running around, you know, all over the place. Like, she's sitting with her feet back. She's by on the beach, right? Like, see this picture of peace, and yet, you know, most of how we live life is so unpeaceful.
Right.
So you're right. We do have to fight for it, because it's a constant battle. There's always something that wants our attention.
Yeah.
And if we give into that at all times, then we are not going to experience that peace.
Yes. And I'm just so excited to have your knowledge and your experience to speak into this conversation, because time is such a big conversation. And I recently heard this quote or the concept of the work you have, or the item that is taking up your time will expand to fill however much time you give it. And I've really been thinking about that a lot lately. And I think that I would love to hear your perspective on that, and kind of tie it into our first concept of why is time such a challenge for entrepreneurs? Because I think that they're related.
Yes. Well, I think one of the reasons why that happens is because time is not tangible. I mean, yes, we can measure it in minutes and hours and days and weeks and years and things like that, right? But when I say I'm going to do something, it's so easy for us to, we'll hear this phrase, lose track of time. Right. And so, yes, if I am giving myself all afternoon to do something, it probably will take me all afternoon, because I don't have kind of like that sense of urgency about a timeline that I'm trying to get to. Right. In the same way, that time will always fill up with something, which is kind of the reverse of that. Right. Any block of time, it will fill with something. And so there are two ways I think we can approach our time: by default or by design, right? Default is I'm kind of just letting it fill with what comes, or what I feel in the moment, or what somebody else drops on my plate, or what they decide is a priority, or, you know, and then, you know, time gets spent, right? Just like with money, when you spend money, yes, maybe you got a cute pair of shoes, and maybe you had a great cup of coffee or whatever, but that money is not coming back. That money is now gone, and, you know, and life is going on. But with your money, when you invest it, and you invest it in things that are going to give you a return, that's like when we choose to use our time by design. I am choosing what matters, and I'm choosing to invest it. And I am, you know, being really intentional about where it's going. And I think one of the reasons why things tend to fill up a bunch of time is because we have a really hard time with like staying on track with one thing. Like, we wear the other, like, multitasking. It's like this superpower, right? Like, oh, I can multitask. And how many tabs right now do you have open on your computer or your phone, or, you know, and I really have come to find from myself, and also, you know, talking to so many women, multitasking is actually kryptonite. It actually weakens us, because it's distracting our focus from what's in front of us that really matters. So yes, if I sit down to work on something and I have all afternoon, it's going to take all afternoon, because I'm going to think about this, and I'm going to go check this, and I'm going to do this, right? But if I get really intentional and say, okay, this is my focus for the next 30 minutes, for the next 50 minutes, whatever that is, and I block out those distractions, which, let's be honest, most of them are not emergencies that we needed to deal with in real time. It's amazing what you can get done when something is getting enough of you for long enough, right? So that would kind of be my response to that, why things tend to fill so much time.
Yeah, that's really good. So how does that tie in then to why do entrepreneurs have such a hard time of it? And why is this something that we need to be super intentional about?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we all only get 24 hours in a day. Right? Like, that is literally what we get. So what's going to set one person apart from someone else is how we choose to spend it, right? Or better yet, how we choose to invest it, right? But as entrepreneurs, we're usually wearing a lot of hats, right? We've got all the hats we wear like in our relationships, in our home and in our community. And then we've got this business that we're also, doing as well. And a lot of entrepreneurs, not every, but a lot of us are working from home. So there's not like, there's a lot of bleeding over of those different roles and those different, requests on our time, which in some ways is an amazing thing, right? I'm so glad I don't have to make a commute. I'm so glad I don't have to have someone tell me when I can and can't take time off and, those types of things. And yet, I have to be really intentional about where my time is going, because it would be really easy, right, to have it just scattered to a whole bunch of places. And so redeem her time is built around a couple of verses from Ephesians 5 that say, look carefully then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time. And some translations say, make the best use of it, because these are difficult days. Like there's so much intention in being careful, being wise, right? And being intentional with where we are investing that time and how we're making the best use of it. Because there are a lot of things around us, right? All those obligations, all those distractions, all those other people's opinions, the expectations that we feel and things like that. And so it's no wonder that most women or entrepreneurs probably would say, like, I don't have enough time. I wish I had more time. If only I had more time, or when I have time. But I truly believe like I don't have enough time is really not the real reason. It's just an excuse.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Because if I were to offer you right now an all expense paid trip to your favorite beach destination, you would find time to go, wouldn't you? Right? I always like to say, like, if you're a parent or you've watched somebody, right, become a parent, like prior to having a child, you're not sitting around twiddling your thumbs thinking, maybe I should bring something into my life that's going to consume 24 hours a day for 18 plus years, plus all the time and energy and stress and whatever, right? Yeah. But what happens when that baby gets put in your arms? You suddenly find a way to make time, because it's a priority. It's a value, right? And so we don't get more than 24 hours. And I always say, like, if God thought we needed 25 and he was going to grant you your wish of an extra hour in your day, he would have given it to you. But guess what? You probably would have wasted it in the same way. Yeah. Right? It would have gone out the window just like it does. And so really it's about how am I stewarding what it is that I have? And am I paying attention to where I'm giving it away to less important things?
Yes, I want to get into that. And I feel like adding these boundaries and being intentional about how we spend our time is one of these concepts that could feel like we're boxing ourselves in, but is actually going to give us freedom. I feel like a lot of the just like God's design for life is like that it feels limiting, but it's actually freeing. And once you put the boundaries on yourself and maybe fight through the uncomfortable period of enforcing, you will see on the other side why it's actually better to do it that way.
Yes. Can I give you a word picture to help make this tangible? You just set it up perfectly. And boundaries. I like to think about a garden. Okay. If you decide I'm going to plant a garden, chances are your purpose in that garden is either to you could produce some kind of harvest of food that you consume, right? So what do you do when you're going to plant a garden? You clear out the space where those seeds are going to go. You don't just randomly start scattering seeds wherever and think you're going to have this great abundantly harvest fruitful, gorgeous flowers or vegetables garden, right? Like you take that space, you get rid of anything that's growing up in that space. Right now, my husband started a garden, and I say started in air quotes for those of you watching on YouTube. And right now he's growing weeds really well in that garden because that space is no longer clear. And so nothing is growing but weeds. So you decide, you determine where that space is, right? You clear out the weeds, AKA distractions. And then you can plant your seeds. Now, here's the thing, you can do that, right? But we live in the country. So we have bunnies, we have squirrels, we have deer, we have all these little critters, raccoons, right? That are like, ooh, here's something fun for me to grab, right? So even if I clear the space and plant the seeds in that plot, but I just leave it open on the sides, anything that wants to can come walk right through, or can come and help themselves to whatever starts growing, right? You're not going to produce the fruit that you want to. So what do we do then? We put up a fence around it. And that's not saying something bad to what's inside. It actually, what it's doing, it's honoring what is inside so that it can grow and be fruitful and be abundant and have a harvest. And it's saying to everything else outside, like, I'm keeping you away because this is what I want to see flourish and grow. And so I think when we apply that concept to our time, I'm not being rude or mean, right? But like I will say to my husband, I'm going to go on focus mode for the next 50 minutes, like, so I can work on this or whatever, and I put that boundary around, which means I'm not answering the phone. I'm not checking email. I'm not scrolling social media. I'm not getting up to change the laundry. I'm not, organizing my files or whatever. I'm just doing that one thing. And he doesn't see that as she doesn't like me. He understands, okay, what's inside that time block is really important right now. Yeah. And so that's really what those boundaries do, is they help us protect what matters and keep the stuff that would take away from that out. And then when I'm done, guess what? The door opens and I'm like, hey, what's going on? What do you need? That kind of thing.
That's beautiful. I love that word picture. And I want to play off of it. How do we identify our weeds in our business? And how do we deal with them?
Such a great question, right? Well, and this kind of, let me just kind of come back to, I think the first step is always paying attention, right? Because what happens is if we're not paying attention, my husband has not been paying attention to the weeds in that garden. And so guess what? Now that he goes over there, they have literally taken over and nothing's growing. And it's going to take so much work for him to clear that space again. Now, I think he made too big of a plot for two of us, but anyway, that's a whole nother story. So that first one is like, am I paying attention to what's getting my time? Right? Because again, things feel little in the moment, right? But one little thing can add to another, can add to another, can add to another. And then that cumulative effect ends up snowballing and really being something that, has a big thing. So I would, like, notice and maybe even write those things down. What are things that if I have said I'm working on this one task or this one project or this one whatever, notice anything that comes across your brain, anything that comes through your device, anything that, you're tempted to kind of go to, because I think noticing is that first place. At first, we don't notice it. We're just, we say yes and think it's no big deal, not realizing the impact it has on us. And they say for every time you get distracted, it takes 20 full minutes to get your brain back on the focus whereas prior to that. So we end up wasting about a third of our day just from the back and forth. But you have to recognize, what is it that I'm turning aside to? So maybe even like being willing to write it down for a day or a couple of days or a week and just start notice what are the reoccurring things that are happening here, right? And then you pick one, because here's the thing. We see all these areas we want to change. We see all these things we want to do, right? Like, we've got great intentions, but we have to then like pick out, okay, which one really matters, or which one am I going to address first? And then we're, depending on what it is, we're looking at how can I either eliminate this distraction so it's not crossing my path while I'm working, or how can I minimize it so that, I might be aware that it's there, but I'm not, going over to it in the middle of something else.
Yeah, thinking everything's an emergency. Like, that's a big thing, is like figuring out the priority of your tasks, because if everything is high priority, nothing's going to get done.
Exactly. And again, most things, like I said earlier, most things you don't need to know about in real time. You don't, most things are not life or death, and it can wait. And I'm a huge proponent of the Pomodoro method, especially for entrepreneurs, which is where you focus on one task for 25 minutes or 50 minutes, and then you take a 5 or 10 minute break. And what I love about that is that pretty much anything in the world can wait for 25 minutes, right? Like, there's no reason that I have to be Johnny on the spot to a text message that comes in, to an email that pops up, to even a phone call that comes through. It can go to voicemail. That's okay. And then when I take that break, I can then turn aside and give it that focus. And I'm also a big proponent of if you know that you're going to have certain tasks you need to do during the day, for example, checking email. Okay. This is one I think as entrepreneurs we fall into, right? Maybe we're not on social media during our workday. Hopefully not, because we all know that's not helping us, but we think email, well, that's important, right? I need to stay on top of my email. And yet, right before we recorded this, I walked out to my mailbox because I had to put something in there. And if I were to walk out to my mailbox every time I thought of it, I would be wasting so much of my day. We have a long driveway, right? And yet what do? We run to our inbox every time we think about it, or in and out all day long. So what I do is I have like one time in my day that's when I go to my mailbox. Right now with your inbox, maybe it's going to be one time in the morning and one time in the afternoon, right? So you can kind of hit it the bookends of your day. But those things you do need to give attention to. Instead of letting them be distractions, make them a part of some kind of regular routine that you have so that you're intentional. Now I don't have to worry about going to the mailbox all day long because I know I'm going to go when I walk the dogs, right? And now I don't have to go to my inbox all day long because I know that right before I take my lunch break, I'm going to go in there and catch up with anything that came in since I was in there last time. And so I'm not as distracted by it. Now I've made it not a distraction because I've assigned it a place to live in my time.
Exactly. Absolutely. And to extend this metaphor that you're talking about, like paying attention, but then also periodically checking back on yourself, like making sure that you're checking in, because the weeds they'll just come. Like we can't do anything about them coming. So we have to stay on top of every so often rechecking ourselves and seeing what has like slipped in.
What's so interesting in the garden, whether it's in the garden or with our time, the weeds grow without any help, right? You don't have to do anything to make those weeds grow. They do it all by themselves. And those roots, if you try to pull a weed that's been there a little while, I mean, those roots are long and strong and you're like, right? And yet the things that we want to grow, we have to be intentional about planting those seeds, watering it, giving it the air, giving it the sunshine, giving it the warmth, and so really, our focus has to be on that. And so it's really just where am I choosing to put my focus? And I love the idea of checking back in, because the sooner I can get to a weed, the less impact it's going to have on my garden.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. That's so good. So if we are not prioritizing keeping our garden weed free, and keeping our fence around the garden, what will it cost us as business owners? What are the negatives of not setting up these kinds of structures and limitations and boundaries?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think one thing is that it causes us to waste time on less important things. The things that make us feel busy, that make us feel like we're working, right? And then because we're spending so much time doing that, we're missing the moments that matter. Right. A lot of us are doing this, and we've also got families or spouses or kids or other things that are heart projects and things like that. And as entrepreneurs, let's be honest, we could literally be working on our businesses like all day long.
Totally.
Into the evening, and I teach women about how we need to disconnect from technology and from doing to give ourselves that refill time in the evening.
Yes.
Need in the morning. I think it leads to a lot of feeling like you're not doing enough, which then fosters doing more. And then it starts, kind of eating away at maybe I'm not enough, right? Like I'm working so hard and I'm not seeing the results that I want to see, and I'm not feeling the peace. And we start really questioning, kind of who we are. And I think, we can then make time our excuse. Well, I just don't have time, right? I would do it if I had more time. I don't. So, okay, I'm just not, and that we could really be missing out on exactly what God has for us and this amazing thing, but we're just, we're not being intentional with our time. And so we're just going to let that be our reason why we say no.
Yes. Would you say, I know you've mentioned a few things, like the true issue behind why we just can't seem to manage our time? Like, what do you think is the root that it comes down to for us?
It's really, what do we value? What is really important? We can say something is important, but you know what? I can go to two places to tell what really matters to you: your bank account, where you're spending your money, and your calendar, where you're spending your time.
Yeah.
If you didn't write those two things down and you're not aware of where it's going, right? Like that's really, really where it comes to is am I making time making time, not finding time? Am I making time for the things that matter and the things that are going to grow me in the direction that God has called me to go in the season that I'm in, whether it's my business, whether it's in my relationships, whether it's in my own health and wellness, whether it's just in my joy and enjoying things and having fun in life, whether it's in how I'm caring for my, my home and those things around me. We need to make sure that we're checking in with that and paying attention to that. Because here's the other thing, which again ties in kind of the money thing as well. There's so many parallels between time and money. If I pay cash rent, it always costs me less than if I say, no, I'll just put that on credit. What does credit do? I'm putting it off till later, and now I'm going to pay interest later. It will cost me more to pay for this item down the road than if I just paid for it now. And the same thing happens with our time, right? And you think about like, if I'm investing in these things that matter now, it will cost, yes, it may cost me some time. It may cost me some money. It may cost me some emotions and things like that, but it will be less than if I don't pay attention to it. And then down the road, it demands my attention. And now I have to give it more time, more energy, more focus, just like the weeds in my husband's garden right now, to get things back to, that peaceful place where there can actually be growth happening. Yeah.
So true. You'll find so much peace from just maintaining it along the way. And I think the peacefulness thing too is an idea that we're talking around, but not actually saying the word, is intentionality. The intentionality of checking in, the intentionality of knowing exactly where your time, where your money are going. Like being intentional and knowing those things is going to bring you so much peace as an entrepreneur.
Exactly. Yes. And when I think of the word peace, I think about being fully present. Like if I'm at peace, I'm not scattered in a bazillion directions, right? I am fully present right here, and I'm giving my best time and attention to what matters that's in front of me. And I like to like really challenge people to say what matters in the season you're in and what also matters long-term, right? Like, what do you want to be said about your 100-year-old self? What's the legacy that's going to be left beyond you and your time on earth? And are we living like that person now? And I got to speak to this is really fun. I got to speak to some high schoolers who are in a CEO program. So they're learning to be entrepreneurs. And I got this opportunity a couple weeks ago to talk to them. And I said, what word do you want to describe your 100-year-old self? And I got all kinds of different answers. One kid even raised his hand. He's like, I want to be notorious. I'm like, okay, well, we'll see, but, and my challenge to them was, don't wait until you're 100 to be that. Like, start intentionally showing up as that person now and investing your time and saying yes to things that are going to take you in that direction. Because that's that difference of living by design versus living by default. And why people get to the end of life, which we don't know how much time we have, right? And just go, wow, well, how did I get here? And have a lot of regrets about where their time went.
Yeah. That's so good. So we've kind of talked about the one side of like, what will we lose if we don't do these things? But I want to end on what will we get if we do these things? Because not only will we feel more peaceful about how we're spending our time, it's going to lead to more success in business. I mean, what else can we get if we live by God's design for time?
Yeah. I mean, it affects everything, right? If your time is being invested in the people and things that matter most, you're going to have a whole lot more joy as you're going through life. You're going to, like you said, see the results, because instead of wasting your time on all these random scattered things, like you're identifying what really matters, what's going to help move me in that direction, that intentionality. You're not always going to feel like you have to do more, or there's this striving. It's this like, I'm okay. And, and I do have an abundance of time, and that new perspective of saying, God has given me all the time I need for what he's called me to. And what a difference to come into your business or go into any other area of your life with that mindset versus there's never enough time, right? Like, you will have such a different outcome, and you will see so much more growth. And I believe exponential growth when you are at peace inside, right? And when you know what matters, and when you're intentionally then creating order in your day so that those things are getting your attention, instead of always feeling like the shoulds rule our lives, right? I should have done this. I should have done that. And then we just, right? So imagine just letting go of that guilt. I had one business owner who's a client of mine say, I feel guilty when I'm working on my business that I'm not with my kids. And when I'm with my kids, I feel guilty that I'm not working on my business.
Yeah.
Right. But I was like, what if both of those things, your time with your kids and your time with your business, each had their own time because you have a well-ordered day and week.
Yeah.
So that way, when you show up to that time block, you're fully there. You don't have to feel the guilt because you know you've got mom time coming up, later and vice versa. Like, I think that's the piece, right? I'm not feeling the guilt and the striving and the I always have to just keep doing, or I'm never going to get there.
That's so good. I really am going to be sitting on what you said about peace is being present where you are. Because that's so true. I feel like that's what I have to fight when I'm fighting for peace. I'm fighting to push the other things out of my head.
Yeah.
So that I can be present in a moment. And it actually does take a lot of work and a lot of practice to get your brain to a point where it can turn off and relax and be present.
Yes. And those things will come up. Like, we're just human beings in a really connected world. But you always have a choice as to, am I going to turn my attention and focus to that, or am I just going to let it pass by?
Yeah.
Right. We walk past things all day long. Right. So we can learn to do that as long as we're paying attention.
So good. I have a separate iMessage set up on my computer that only goes to my computer. So if I have a work thought and I am out and about and I need to remember it, I will text from my phone to my computer. So it's like, it's there, I'll deal with it later, but I can get it off my mind for now.
Yes. Yes. When you can I have a notebook next to me. I brain dump. If something comes across my brain that matters, I'll just put it on there. And then when I have that next break, or I have one of those, you kind of reset time blocks.
Catch all day. Yeah.
Exactly. Then you can go to it and either deal with it in the moment or assign it someplace to live. And it may, you know what, by that time, it may not even matter. Isn't that so interesting?
So true.
So many things we think matter in the moment, a day from now, a week from now, maybe even an hour from now, don't matter like we thought it did. So if we slow down what we say yes to, wow, we might not give as many yeses to a bunch of random things.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness. You are such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom on this, and I'm glad that people can continue to listen to your podcast, can sign up for your coaching. What are the different offerings if people are interested in getting involved with you?
Yeah, well, the best place to find everything is at redeemhertime.com. Of course, the podcast is a great way to hang out, put me in your earbuds while you're out and about or whatever. I have a new guide that I just put together called Fill Your Cup First, because so often we're tempted to just get up and start doing, especially if we have a lot of big goals for our business and things in our home life that we are wanting to give attention to. And yet, if we don't fill up first, we can't pour out, because you can't pour from empty into anything or anyone. So I teach women, how do we do that? How do we fill up intentionally in the morning and the evening so that we're not going from the time we get up until the time we go to bed? So those would be some of the best places to hang out and start seeing some growth.
Awesome. Those links will be down in the description so everyone can find you. My last question for everybody is, what is bringing you peace today?
You know what? Right now, I love fall. There's something about fall that beckons me to come outside. And, because as an entrepreneur, of course, I can be in front of my computer, all day long. And we have built actually built a 5K course on our property. And so we have a trail that goes through the woods. And so getting out, not being connected to anything. Usually my dog is with me. Some days my husband's with me, some days he's not, but just getting out in fresh air and just being, and not having to do anything, but just breathe in the air and move my body and enjoy creation, enjoy the beautiful leaves. Cause fall always goes faster than we want it to. That's really bringing a lot of peace right now.
Right there with you. I love the feeling of fall so much. It really is cooling off here, like low 70s instead of 80s and 90s. And it's so nice. And when we come out with this episode too, it'll be near Thanksgiving. So we'll be in the heat of fall. It'll be great. So
fun, right? Yes. And what good opportunities to push pause and to be grateful and thankful for the time we have and for the people and things that God has put in our life to fill that right now.
And a good time to reset and think about how we're going to spend our time as the new year is coming as well.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Liz. This has been incredible. and I appreciate your time on the podcast, and can't wait to stay in touch.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. Don't forget to connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and we would love it if you would leave a review wherever you're listening. We'll see you next week for more tips for how to become a peaceful entrepreneur.